Hi everybody, welcome to this free class where I am saying thank you to you all for the support and encouragement and everything that you've given to me on my arty journey this last year. So in this little class we're going to be creating some hanging art using transparencies and cardstock, watercolour paper, whatever you can get your hands on really. I'm just going to take you through the different steps that I use to create this. So if you go onto my website, there will also be some downloads with these rainbow shapes on, and that you can use if you want to. If you don't want to draw your own, then by all means use those. So I am using a sheet of Dina's transparency, but even acetate would work just as well. And I am using a Posca pen and drawing out my rainbow shapes. I experimented with using different sized Posca pens, but actually felt in the end that the thicker pen worked much better. It looked nicer. So I'm going to draw different sizes, different arch shapes of rainbows, and then I'm just decorating them with some different marks inside just to create a bit more interest really. Different dots and lines and patterns, just to make these rainbows have some different features. So I ended up with 5 rainbows in the end hanging from my mobile, because odd numbers, as you know, odd numbers work really well. So I would go for an odd number because that will look best. So the first thing you need to do is to draw your rainbows onto acetate. Now you don't have to do them on acetate if you don't want to. You can just as easily do these onto cardstock or some thick watercolour paper, and you would just need to do your painting, your decorating on both sides of the cardstock, obviously, because it's going to be hanging up and it will be twirling around, and you want the colour and interest to be on both sides. So once you're happy with your rainbow shapes, you're then going to get another piece of acetate, clip it over the top if you're using acetate for your rainbows. If not, you don't need to do this part. And then I'm going to kind of trace over these designs, but I'm going to start adding some colour in. So I'm using Posca pens for this just because it was easier to get the colours into the shapes that I've drawn. And I could have just coloured in the rainbows that I'd drawn, but I wanted to make them a little bit more substantial, and that's why I'm using 2 pieces of acetate, transparency acetate, whatever you want to call it. But you don't have to do 2 pieces if you don't want to. You can just colour in the ones that you've drawn on the one piece, but then accept that they might not be quite as might not hang quite as flat. They might bend a little bit more. So I'm just going in with my Posca pens and adding some colour. You can do this as well with acrylic paint if you don't have Posca pens. That would work just as well. Obviously you'd need quite a fine brush to do it with, but I just found this was the quickest way to add some colour. And then you will need to set it aside to dry. You can, if you are brave enough, dry it with a heat tool, but be very careful, because if you apply too much heat in one place, the transparency will buckle, will change shape, and it will affect, it won't lie flat. So do be very careful about that. I am speaking from experience. I have had this happen. So now you can see when I flip that over, the colour shows through on the other ones. So once I was happy and it was nice and dry, I then went back in on the back and started drawing over the rainbow shapes on the back as well, on top of the colour. So now I've got the sheet at the back that I drew first. Then I've got the sheet I put on top where I've added the colour first, and then I've gone in and drawn the lines over the top of the rainbow again. So I've got a double image really. I've got one with colour and lines and one with just lines. So that's how I did this. And these, what are going to be happening, these are going to be cut out and then stapled together. So like I say, just to kind of make them a bit more substantial. This was quite a fun way to create these little rainbows. And what I'm doing here is just adding the same pattern on the back that is on the front, because in some places you can see through the rainbows. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but it was an easy way to just create the same pattern on the back as the front, and then when they twirl they look really nice together. So next you just need 2 pieces of wood. It would work as just sticks from like the garden if you've got some from an old tree, or these are pieces of driftwood. I am an absolute nightmare for collecting things on the beach when we go to the beach. Sea glass, driftwood. Yeah, so I do have a little bit of a stash. And I'm just tying them together with a piece of fabric, and I've kind of tied it in a sort of X. So I've pulled it across one way, crossed it over, and then gone round the other way and tied it in a knot. And you can see that creates a nice sturdy X shape with those pieces of driftwood. And that's what is going to hang, we're going to hang our mobile from when it's ready. I'm just tightening it up so it's not wobbly. Okay. So next job, I am using a piece of Dina's watercolour cardstock watercolour paper, and using some nice warm colours. So I've gone in with ruby first, and a wet brush, and then I'm using tangerine, and I'm just going to create a piece of double-sided paper with some nice colour and pattern on it that's going to work with my brightly coloured rainbow mobile. So here I'm just using ruby, tangerine, lemon, and adding some colours onto the watercolour paper. And then I've just flipped it over, and I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. The same colours, and because I want this to be double-sided, because again it's going to be hanging up, so you're going to be able to see both sides of it. So you don't have to do the same colours on both sides if you don't want to, but it was just the easiest thing to do really, to create the same thing on both sides. It involved less thinking. Sometimes that's nice, isn't it? Just less thinking, more doing. So here I'm using the Circles for Painting stencil and some lime paint, and obviously the background is nice and dry because as you know, orange and green, that would make brown. So as long as the background's dry, that won't happen. But just trying to add some interest onto these backgrounds that we've created on this one sheet of watercolour paper. I'm keeping the colours bright because obviously this is a rainbow mobile. It's meant to be happy and it's going to have lots of fabulous affirmations on it when we've finished. So keep it bright and cheerful if that's your vibe. And if it's not, if you can be cheerful and happy without bright colours, then you go with what works for you. But as you know, I do love a rainbow colour, so that's the kind of idea that I was going with here. So as you can see, I've built up lots of different patterns and colours onto this background. I've done the same on both sides, just so that it works together. Now I'm going in with a bit of white just to add a little bit of contrast as well onto that background too. But it's looking quite busy, but also colourful and pretty. I like it. I'm liking it a lot. So this is the kind of stage that you need to get to next. So the next thing you're going to do is grab your transparency rainbows or however it is you've created them, and you're going to start cutting them out. And then we are going to be stapling them together and hole punching the top. And then we're going to start assembling our mobile. So this is getting exciting now. So it's a little bit of a fiddly job, but it's worth doing carefully. And then you're going to match up your images, and then obviously they're going to go back to back like they were when we created them, so that they should kind of match up nicely together. And if you have done them on the transparency, then you will get that lovely colour showing through whichever way they turn when they hang up. And you can see that's how they're going to work. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is start to think about fastening them together and then adding that hole punch hole in the top of them as well. So I'm using a Tim Holtz tiny attacher here just to staple these together. It just is the quickest way to do it, really. I'm just doing a couple of staples at the very bottom and one just at the inside top of the arch. You can see I'm just matching them up, checking that that's the right way around. Yeah, just add those staples to fix them together. I mean, you can use matte medium if you want to, or even double-sided tape would work, but I don't mind the staples, that's okay. You don't really notice them once it's hanging up. So now I'm just using this single hole punch, and you do have to press on quite hard with the acetate. It's quite tough to get through, but it will do it. And I'm just adding that hole in the top of each of these rainbows, and that's where I'm going to fasten my cord onto. So I'm using quite a thick thread to fasten these rainbows onto my mobile. And it comes in lots of different colours, this one that I've got. I think I just found it on Amazon. And it's quite a nice thickness for this, really. So you can still see the colours, but they're not so thick that they're difficult to work with. So I'm using lots of bright coloured thread for my rainbow mobile, because obviously this is a brightly coloured little project that we're doing. You don't have to. You can use string. You can even use like sewing cotton if you want to, or fishing twine, anything you want. Whatever, just use what you've got. Use what you've got. You don't need to buy anything special for this. So yeah, you can see here I've got different colours, rainbow colours. Of course, you wouldn't expect anything else, would you really? And you can see I'm just doing a simple knot there and leaving that length of thread on each of those rainbows. So now I'm taking the sheet of watercolour paper that I decorated using the different rainbow colours and stencils, and I'm just drawn some circles onto their different sizes, and these are going to be used on the mobile. We're going to use these to add our little affirmations onto. So unless you have your own words that you want to add on, then you need the little download sheet that you can find with the free class. And yeah, I've got some bits of acetate left over, which I'm going to put to one side, and I'm going to be drawing some little hearts and things on those to add on to my mobile in a bit. So here I am going to hole punch the top and bottom of one of the circles, and then what I'm going to do, I know you're going to think this is crazy, but I'm going to cut my thread and I'm going to add the circle into the middle of my cord that I have added onto the rainbow. So then once I've got that fastened on there, I'm then going to add the remainder of the cord that I snipped off back onto the top of it, and you'll notice then that you've got this little circle hanging just above your rainbow. And this is where we've got two sides that we can add the affirmations onto. So we're going to do that process with all of your rainbows and the little circles that you've cut out, and just try and add them at different heights different places so that they're not all going to be hanging at the same place when your rainbow cords are attached to your sticks, your driftwood or whatever it is that we've used. So here you can see I've just grabbed a piece of transparency and I'm just going to cut out a little heart, and then I'm going to staple that onto my little circle just to start to add some more embellishments onto there as well. Sorry about the moving camera. I think I caught it with my hands. So yeah, here just cutting out the affirmation, and then I'm going to glue it on using my little fine applicator tip bottle with some clear glue in it. Stick those in place, and then you've got your little affirmation quote hanging above your rainbow, and use your little bits of transparency that are left over. Definitely don't let anything go to waste. I mean, you could just as equally well draw the hearts on there if you want to, but I really love how the light catches on the transparency, particularly when it's hanging up. It just brings a whole different dimension to your work. So here I've got some bits of the card that we decorated, the watercolour cardstock that we decorated, and I'm just going to staple those in some places as well on the rainbows. So you're just going to kind of do this process now for all your rainbows and your circles, and add your quotes, and get to a point where you are happy with how they look. So here I'm just carrying on, adding on my quotes, and just adding these little circles into my hanging rainbows. And then I'm going to start just making sure that I'm happy with how each of these look, and adding in the little acetate hearts and cutting out little hearts from the piece of watercolour paper that's left over as well. Just so that I'm kind of trying to bring the different elements together, so that I'm using the same colours on some of the rainbows just to echo what's on the circles as well. And this is starting to take shape. So now it's time to start tying these elements onto your sticks that you've created that cross with. And what you need to do is just try and tie them on so that they are not all hanging at the same length. So you want some shorter than others, some longer, and just when you've tied it on, keep holding it up just to make sure that it's looking right, it's looking how you want it to be. And then here I did just on one of the rainbows add a couple of extra hearts hanging down. So here I'm just using a little dotty stamp that you can find on my website. I think I've still got some in stock. I'm just adding some more embellishments onto some of these circles, just adding that little bit of stamping. And then I'm also, once I've done that, so that's archival ink that I'm using there as well, I'm then going to go in with a black pen and I'm going to outline with quite loose lines some of the little hearts and even the circles as well. So you're just starting to bring the black that's on the rainbows, you're bringing that up into the other elements of your project. So here you can see I'm just outlining those hearts using a Posca pen. And just take your time going around everywhere you've added a little heart onto the rainbows and the circles, and just add some more details onto those. So then here I decided, because I still had some of my cardstock left that I'd decorated, that I wanted to make some double-sided hearts that I'm just stapling either side of the cord on my mobile. So you're just adding more and more little elements all the time. So now I'm adding some white as a contrast with all the black that's going on. I'm just adding some little dots and some marks and patterns in white on the rainbows. And that just creates more interest there as well, adding some dots on the circles in white to kind of echo what's going on with the black dots. But yeah, this is just about creating those layers of interest in your work as well. And I love how the white works on those rainbows, because there's such a lot of black going on, but it's brilliant. It works perfectly. So here I'm just using a black pen and I'm just in quite a loose way, just outlining around those circles as well on both sides. Again, just pulling that black further up the project. And then the final thing you want to do is just add some cord onto the top, just so that you can hang it from the ceiling. And then of course, once you've hung it up, you can double check that everything's hanging at about the right length where you want it to be. And if not, you can adjust it. So here was my finished project. I love how the light shines through the transparencies with the colours. It really gives it quite a nice quality. And then my little affirmations on those circles as well. So this is the finished project. So I really hope you've enjoyed this free class as a thank you for all your support and encouragement over the last year. I'd love to see the projects that you make, so don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Art Journal Love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.